morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. At CIQ, we're focused on powering the next generation of software infrastructure, leveraging the capabilities of cloud, hyperscale, and HPC. From research to the enterprise, our customers rely on us for the ultimate Rocky Linux, Warewulf, and Apptainer support escalation. We provide deep development capabilities and solutions, all delivered in the collaborative spirit of open source.
Yay! Okay, welcome everybody. Ooh, Jonathan Anderson. I am so excited for today's webinar. This is like a long time in the coming, and like nothing pleases me more than to give you a space and a place to shine and really show off the things that not only you, I know it's a whole community, but you are the representation on this webinar at this moment for Warewulf new version 4.5.0. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you for being here.
I am also very excited not only to get to show off kind of the hard work that the community's been doing in Warewulf for a while, but it, like you said, it's been a long time coming. I think it's been about a year since our last release, and I'm excited for not only the features in this one, but what it represents for our ability to kind of iterate and hopefully get more releases out more often in the future. So look forward to that.
Yes, very exciting. Also, just on this, this webinar, CIQ, YouTube kind of space, we are going in the direction. We are at 933 subscribers right now, which is really exciting because there's 933 people that are going to be notified that we are talking right here, right now, today about the new release of Warewulf. Also, that means that we're going in the direction of 1,000 subscribers. And at the 1,000 subscribers, we have decided to do a little giveaway where we are going to be giving away a beautiful Carhartt backpack. So I am going to share my screen. I'm going to do it. Carhartt backpack. See, it's titled, it's sharing, it's happened. This is so cool. And Jess, this is you, girl. I know it is, right? Or maybe it was Julia. One of you out there took the actual picture of the actual backpack. And how I know this is because that cool little chair that is behind it is in our office in Reno. So this is the actual backpack that the 1,000th subscriber on YouTube is going to be winning. Very exciting, very awesome. We're going to announce it live. We're going to get a hold of you any which way that we possibly can. So make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. And let me see, I almost pressed okay, stop sharing. I almost left here. So Jonathan, it would just have been you hanging out.
I'm going to just put this out here real quick. Maybe the giveaway backpack needs to come with some CIQer signatures on it as well.
Ooh, I like your stuff.
I'm gonna call people out right here. Okay. I think that backpack needs some signatures on it before it goes out.
Okay, maybe we'll ask the person who they want. Because if I go signing it, that might be awesome. It might not be awesome.
You're a celebrity. You're on the CIQ webinar every week.
There you go. Thank you very much. Love it. Love it. Okay, so Jonathan, let's would you mind just giving like a little bit of like a framework of what Warewulf is and a little bit of the difference of like Warewulf 3 to Warewulf version 4, even though I know we really want to talk about 4.5, but it comes up a lot and I think it would be helpful.
Yeah. So Warewulf is a cluster provisioning management system. So it's not kind of a full do everything for you cluster management system like some others might be, but it really is focused just on the process of I have some servers, they're probably all the same, and I want to take them from they're just metal in the rack. I want to be able to turn them on and use them for something. And it comes with some batteries included for that to help you get we have some node images that are available in the community to help you get, let's say, Rocky Linux provisioned on all of them, and then to configure them to do different things depending on what you add to that image or the configuration that you push out in the Warewulf overlay system. It's difficult for me to compare to Warewulf 3, mostly because I've never used Warewulf 3 day-to-day. I've really been a part of the Warewulf 4 system. One of the big things that people notice is that Warewulf 4 is really focused on this stateless provisioning paradigm where you turn your hardware on, and every time you turn it on, you get the same configuration out of it. Unless you've changed something on the server side, but if you restart your server, you get the same thing back. There are some questions about what that means for the future of being able to use the disks on the system, and we can talk about that a little bit when we start getting into development that's happened in 4.5.0. But for the most part, Warewulf is focused on that experience. You turn the node on, you know it's going to behave the same way as the last time you turned it on. From kind of a systems perspective, when I have in a past life evaluated whether we were going to deploy Warewulf 3 at the time, one of the things we didn't like about it was how opaque some of the configuration in it was. My understanding, I wasn't the one doing the eval, but my understanding was a lot of Warewulf 3's configuration existed in a database that you kind of had to manage in order to get information in and out of it, including, I think, all of the overlay files that you wanted, all of the configuration files that you wanted to push out to nodes existed in a database. And then the node images that you were sending out were kind of big stateful directories that you had to initialize by hand, and you would log into them and make changes. You can do that kind of thing with Warewulf 4 as well, but Warewulf 4 kind of takes that stateless paradigm of being able to declaratively say, I will turn my node on and get this config, all the way back to how you configure Warewulf itself. All of the configuration for Warewulf is just normal files in your file system. There are a pair of YAML documents that configure Warewulf itself. The overlay files are just files on your file system that we can provide some convenience commands to manage, but you can always also just go see them on the file system and put files in there that will get pushed out to nodes or edit them directly. There's some templating in there as well, and we can show off some of that. But that's, to me, the value of Warewulf 4. It tries to be as thin a layer as possible between you and getting something useful pushed out to your nodes and making them do the work that you want without having to have as many opinions about how that system, how that service should be configured once it's in production in your environment.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to direct people to this webinar when they ask me the difference between 3 and 4 and why 4 and what is there such a difference. So thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. No
I know that, maybe this is the right time, maybe it isn't, but if people are interested in kind of Warewulf and what's going on with it, I know that the community has actually changed places, changed locations, and that was actually a big and awesome move, and also a testimony to the growth of the community. And so where can we actually find that?
Yeah, great. And I hope people can bear with me for a moment, because I don't just want to talk about it. I want to show where these things are so that people have a point of reference. But I've got like a mess of windows here on my desktop, so I'm going to start trying to share things.
Take it.
Yes.
Yes.
The first thing is, let's see. Let's get this first one up. Oh, I can share a whole window instead of just a Chrome tab.
I love this. I love it when you share things. I love demos. I like to actually see it. This is magical. Thank you.
Oh man,
I know. That's what I always got nervous.
Oh no, okay. It's this one. It's this one right here, I think. Okay. We'll start here. So the first thing, great, is that, so Warewulf was at one point, Warewulf 4 anyway, was being managed as part of kind of a larger umbrella organization, HPC-NG, or HPC Next Generation. That organization's purpose is kind of has been fulfilled, frankly, and Warewulf was kind of the only thing left in it. So we've done some work to try and rebrand Warewulf's organization around itself. And so if you're looking for Warewulf, we're looking at kind of the Git repo here. The source code is now in a Warewulf Git organization rather than having to find it in an HPC-NG. And so here you can find the code, but you can also find releases, and we'll talk about that in a bit. This is also where you can go to file issues. And so if you are using Warewulf and you've noticed a problem, or you have something you wish it would do, put that in here. And if you're interested in what's going on, what's coming up in the future of Warewulf, we've got some milestones in here with dates. Our goal is to try and get 2, I'll say, major releases out a year. We're hoping to schedule those in time for ISC in the spring and then SC in the fall. And so the 4.5.0 and we're doing that kind of in lockstep, lockstep is too strong, in collaboration with the OpenHPC community in an attempt to try and get these releases into their release schedule, which is also targeted at matching those large conferences where a specific audience would be interested in a tool like this. So we have 4.5.0 out, but we're already working, as you can tell, on 4.5.1, which has some like smaller non-breaking enhancements that we wanted to get in but didn't quite make it in 4.5.0, and then bugs that we've noticed or that have been reported since the release, which was only Sunday, but we've had a few. So that's the first thing. So yeah, if you're looking for Warewulf itself or code, come here. The second thing, and I wish I wasn't jumping between windows quite as much, but the next few after this should be all back in that same window. So we'll start here. We have a new Slack presence as well. And so here we go. Yeah. So if you aren't already part of the Warewulf Slack team, is this sharing? It should be sharing.
I don't see it yet, but I'm sure that they are on it. Yeah. And I'm sure that they'll we have little magic fingers behind the scenes that they'll add the link as well into into the chat. It's not there yet. Okay. Yeah. We're working on it.
So I'll talk a little bit. So yeah. Can't access my screen. Fascinating. Okay, I'll just talk about this one for now. Apparently StreamYard is having trouble sharing Slack, which is probably a good thing.
Probably.
So yeah, we have a new Warewulf Slack. It is at warewulf.slack.com, but you can get a I tell you what, I'll just go back to sharing that browser window because I can show where you can get access to it there.
Oh, good. So from the Git repository, you can access the Slack
not from the Git repository, but from the website. So yeah. Okay. So if you go to warewulf.org/help, you'll end up on this page, which has access to the documentation in the GitHub, but also to our Slack community. And this is now just warewulf.slack.com. Frankly, it was a pretty encouraging thing that when we collected some contacts from the original Slack that was with HPCNG and just sent, hey, we're moving over to this new Warewulf Slack. Come join us if you're interested. Like the next day, we had 100 people in there, which was pretty encouraging. And it's pretty active. I've been really excited by not just the people using it, but the people interested in helping to develop or work on documentation has been a big thing for us. And then there's like little subgroups that have splintered off. There's a whole channel for people that are trying to get Warewulf running on Raspberry Pis and single board computers like that. And there's a channel in there for people that are still using and maintaining, in a certain sense, the version 3 of Warewulf. So, it's been great to see the community kind of come together and consolidate into that one place. Let's see, what else? Okay, so another thing that has happened since the last release is we've really formalized our steering committee process. So we were already having meetings and taking some notes, but this is to release management. We have a steering committee process. We meet twice a month and talk about development and what's happening, what's coming into the project, what people have discovered using it. So these notes are public, but I'm wondering where they're posted. If you join the meeting, you'll definitely have access to them. And if you'd like to join that meeting and listen in and hear what's going on, it's certainly open right now. Let me know in Warewulf, or in the Warewulf Slack. You can reach out to me or ask in the general channel or something like that. We'd love to see you and hear from you and what you're using Warewulf for and how your experience has been. And then one more thing on the community front, which is a little bit more towards the release management side of this. We have this nightly release now. So this is a really easy way for people who want to try out Warewulf, like the latest features that haven't made it into a normal release yet, for them to install one of these packages rather than have to build it from source. Because if you If you build Werewolf a lot, it's not that big of a deal. But if you've never built it before, it can be kind of frustrating. So these packages exist for Enterprise Linux 7. So if you're running it on an old CentOS environment, you can do that. Enterprise Linux 8 or 9, if you're on Rocky 8 or 9 or an equivalent. And then SUSE Leap 15.5, I think is what I'm seeing there. So all that's there. And one thing that I want to call out for viewers, because of an eccentricity of the way GitHub releases work, this release is showing up. Maybe it's not because of how wide this is, but the release shows up with a different date than it actually has been. So people are often concerned that this release is out of date or it's not being updated. The packages in it do get updated. So we can see this one here just was updated last night, as you would expect. But if we're out here on, oh, that's not where I want to be. I want to go here. If we're just looking at releases and then look for nightly, we need to find a way to pin this up higher so people see it. But if you look here, this date is when we first started doing nightly releases, and we haven't found a way to update this yet without destroying and recreating the release every night, which we're trying to avoid. But that's where that is.
Cool. So yeah, that's a super fun little added, I don't know, it's not a feature, but capability. It's awesome.
I included it in the release notes for 4.5.0 because it is a new thing since the last release. But yeah, it's on the community side. We're generating this nightly release now, which is kind of cool.
Really cool.
So a couple more things that are worth calling out before we start talking about 4.5.0 specifically. As I mentioned, documentation has been a bit of a gap for us. And I think that's in this tag. Yeah, so one of the things to call out is that we are finally generating 2 different streams of documentation. We have whatever's in main right now, but then separately, we're tracking documentation for 4.5x. And so that will be kept up to date as we're developing things that will get pushed out to 4.5.1, 4.5.2, that kind of thing. But then if there's new functionality that won't be released as a 4.5, we'll put that in main. And so people can continue to look at either of these depending on whether really you're using a nightly or using a released version. And then we'll plan to keep 4.5x published when we get to 4.6x and expect to have more lines of documentation up here as we go on. And then one other documentation thing I wanted to highlight. So the quick start guide here has been a bit of a pain point because it hadn't been updated in a while. The previous version of this was based on the expectation that you would be building Warewulf from source. But now that we're publishing packages, I at least, who updated this, think that it makes a lot more sense for most people in a quick start context to be installing from the packages that we're providing. So this guide has been updated to expect that. Hopefully this is showing, 4.5.0. It was earlier, the release candidate. So you can use this guide to install Warewulf, get started really quickly. I did find something that I want to change here, although I think with this guide it works as expected. And I was really pleased when updating this documentation that I was able to just follow the instructions and I had a working Warewulf on the outside. And so hopefully you can follow this guide and have the same experience.
It is always nice when things work as they say they will. So yes, thank you for all of that.
I've forgotten one more thing before we start talking about 4.5.0 specifically. And this is, again, getting a little bit more towards that. Another big change that has happened since the last release, and one of the reasons that there's been such a delay is that we've really focused on testing in this release. And so these are issues that are still open and pending right now. But we have a fully automated test suite in place now, finally, that a lot of work has gone into. We certainly don't have 100% coverage of the code or anything like that, but now every time a change is made, any pull request that comes in, we have a full test suite that's run against 3 different versions of Golang. We're also making checks for code formatting and linting to make sure that when things are changed, things that worked before continue to work. And if a bug is found, we test for that bug, which seems like it should just be assumed, but we're we're formalizing this process all the time. And so, yeah, if you're interested in software reliability or software testing, that is also a great place to get involved, is to help with the test suite, because there's a lot of work done, but there's work to do also.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you again for all the work that you do on this, and everybody else in the community. So we saw that little list of those of you that had attended the previous meeting when you were sharing the notes from the meeting. And so,
oh yes,
it's not just CIQ. Obviously, CIQ is here. We provide support and extra features and help and implementation and all of that kind of stuff. But it's good to see the collaboration going on.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think? Should we go into a demo? I guess one thing that we should say is, if you're watching and you have a question about Warewulf or have had an experience, I'd hope that you will put your comments into the chat, and we'd love to answer questions and highlight some of that. But I've got a few things that I can show off in Warewulf 4.5 if we're ready for that. But you let me know. What should we do?
Now, there's no better time than now. I want to see it. Show me it.
All right. And this definitely won't be everything. I think I've moved away from it. But yeah, if you want to see a pretty complete list of what's in this release, the release notes are pretty, I won't quite say exhaustive, but there's a lot of stuff in there. And so there's a lot of detail about what's going on. But we'll switch over to a demo environment and show off a couple of them that I'm happy about.
So are you going to get into a little bit what to do? Like, is there a big difference if you're running 4.4 right now versus and like what it's going to take to kind of do the update to 4.5, or if you're just kind of assuming that they're coming in fresh?
That is a great question. I didn't plan to talk about that, but I really should have. So let me get this share shared so they can get that pulled up, and then I'll start.
I mean, it's okay either way, but maybe let's just be clear. And then especially, I think we covered this, like if you're coming from 3,
if you're coming from 3, it's best not to think of it as there being an upgrade path. That's more like our strong recommendation would be, oh no, can't access this screen either. My recommendation there would be to set up a new server and migrate things to it rather than to try to upgrade from one to the other. I think I'm going to need to share my whole screen. So let me move some windows around.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that we're only sharing what needs to be shared.
You want me to sing a little bit?
Yeah, here it's coming. Okay, sorry about that.
That's
is that gonna work? Oh my! And now we've got this whole thing going. Yeah, so we'll at least man, I want to be able to see what's going on, but I'm not gonna be able to. Okay. So to the question of migrating, for the most part, upgrading from 4.4 or 4.4.1 to 4.5 should be relatively straightforward. If you've customized the base overlays, so Warewulf uses a set of overlays. They're usually in var lib Warewulf overlays. If you've modified, let's say, the host overlay or the generic overlay or the www.init overlay, then those changes will be overwritten when you upgrade. And we're trying to improve for the future the separation between these system overlays and then custom overlays you might provide, like these that I've added. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing to be aware of is, and we'll show off a config or a command here real quick as part of it. If you Warewulf cares which network interface is primary, because that is the one that it's going to be provisioning over. And in the past, the way that worked is you had your list of network devices, and then is this one primary, true or false, or yes or no, or something like that. That's not how it works anymore. Now you specify your primary interface, and it looks like I actually don't have either of these set as primary, but if you're specifying a primary interface separate than what it would pick on its own, that's on the node level. So let's actually change that. Let's say node, well, I can edit it here. So you would say primary network default. And so now, hopefully, yeah, primary netdev is default. So that's the biggest difference. But my understanding, I haven't tested this myself, but my understanding is if you're still specifying it the old way, Warewulf will still ingest that and respect it. It'll still use that value. But if it writes out what the default is, this is how you do it now. Otherwise, for the most part, a lot of it is bug fixes and new features that shouldn't interfere with your existing environment. But we'd still recommend backing up your warewulf.conf and nodes.conf and probably your overlay directory in case you need to roll back to a previous version or reach out for help. And that way you'll make sure you don't lose anything. So give me one moment. Man, I wasn't anticipating sharing my whole screen, but now I don't have my notes. So let me pull up my notes in a different place, and that way I will know what I wanted to show off.
Yeah, maybe we can take that screen down. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have anything weird in our little internal chat, but maybe we don't need our stream.
Oh, yeah, this is here too. I apologize. Oh, my. I'm just going to do this. This is what happens.
Exactly. I totally feel your pain, man. And that is exactly why I was like, I don't think I want to share because you never know.
Okay. Here are my notes. Excellent. So yeah, one of the things, there are normal features that are added in Warewulf 4, 4.5, but there's a few preview things that we've added that some members of the Warewulf development community are pretty excited about. So Warewulf uses other systems as subsystems within itself. So ultimately, Warewulf is using DHCP to configure nodes over the network, and then it uses Pixie to boot, or a program called iPixie to provide a configuration and transmit a kernel and a node image to it. And then we use TFTP to do that actual file transfer. And historically, those have all been separate components. But Warewulf 4.5 provides the optional ability to use a single program called DNSMask to take over the DHCP and the TFTP configuration. So that would happen in etc warewulf.conf, and it's actually pretty simple. We have DNSMask here and DNSMask here, and we're automatically generating a DNSMask configuration, and people that are interested and might want to use DNSMask for configuring these services instead of DHCPD or TFTPD can use this, and it just worked. I was actually really happy about how well it worked in preparing for this. And so I've got a node set aside that's booted up this way. The other thing that is a preview feature is a little bit of storage configuration. So this is still also, like the others, a bit of a preview, and I was having a little bit of trouble with it just minutes before this demo, as it always is. So I think I'll leave the node up to start, and then maybe we'll reboot it to see it provision at the very end. But you can specify partitions that you want to provision as part of bringing the node up, what file system you want them to be, and where they should be mounted. And the ultimate goal of this is to be able to provision file systems with, hopefully, in a future release, the ability to provision the node image onto the disk without having to consume memory with that. So we still want the provisioning to be stateless, but maybe we'll be able to write that image to disk rather than to memory to be able to use the memory for computation instead.
So when you say maybe, that's yes, you can if you want to?
We do not yet have the capability for it, but we're working towards that being our goal. But that is intended for a future release, but we're still working out what it's actually going to look like. So if that's something that interests you, it's a good opportunity to come and join Slack and have a voice in that conversation for how disk-full provisioning might work in a future release of Warewulf. So I'm showing off one of the more official new features of Warewulf here. I think node edit was present before, even in 4.4, but it's been cleaned up a lot. And frankly, I've been using it to do my Warewulf configuration in preparation for this demo more than just running commands. So if I'll say again, if I edit a node, and you can edit a profile as well. Not only are the attributes of that node present, but then there are comments at the top that show you all of the available configuration options and how they should be formatted in a node. So earlier, if you saw, I was able to find the primary network declaration here, and then just copy it down into my node, fill it out, and save it. And that became active configuration in my node. And I can do that to change anything about my node here, quit out, and if I have made a change, it will ask me if I want to apply it to the node, and we say yes, and it's re-ingested. So that makes discovery of options and how they're formatted really simple, and lets you see kind of the whole node's configuration. The other way to do that is with this node list command. This is what we've done all the time, but this is read-only. So now you can do something like that, but make changes directly to the node. Another thing that's been requested a fair bit is the ability to copy a container. So if I look at so containers are how Warewulf refers to the node images that you ingest into it and that you can provision out to nodes. One of the things we wanted to be able to support is, let's say I have this production image, I want to make changes to it and then boot some nodes with that changed version before I roll it out into production for the rest of the cluster. And you could do that before, but you had to kind of do it in the background and just copy files around. Now we can say, well, it's probably in my, you have to spell it correctly. And I'll do this 891. Or no, I'll do the 9.3 because it's smaller. Copy Rocky 9.3 to 9.3 test. And the end result of this will be that I have a Rocky 9.3 test container that starts from exactly where Rocky 9.3 was. And then I can shell into that, make changes, point some nodes at it to boot it, make sure it works before I boot it on the rest of the cluster. I'm probably going to cancel this out. One of the things about my test environment here is it's pretty slow, and especially the disks are pretty slow. So rather than wait for this, I think I'm going to cancel
Jonathan, do you like questions kind of like as we go, or you want to wait until you're like done with your flow?
I say if there's questions, let's take them. I'm going to stop sharing for now and see if maybe I can get where are you? Here you are. And see if maybe I can get the share going just as this window again. But yeah, if there are questions, let's take them.
Yeah. So thanks, Nano. So they're saying, what are your plans for offering a CIQ Warewulf version 4.5.1 Aptainer container?
So there's some work happening on the community side for building and supporting a containerized version of Warewulf itself, where you could run Warewulf as a container. Right now, I haven't seen any movement towards doing that with Aptainer. But there's not, as I think about it right here, there's not too much of a reason why you couldn't. The biggest issue is that Warewulf is one component in a set of services. So it wants to configure DHCP for you. It wants to configure TFTP for you. So running all of those inside of one container isn't what one would normally do. Normally, you'd have a container for each of those services. And that's where, somewhere in my notes just from yesterday, I wrote down, hey, it would be great if we could run Warewulf as a Kubernetes appliance and have all of these services running as microservices. But that's not something that's really planned out. It's more just an idea that I had.
Okay, so and then there's a follow-up to the question, is there an HA feature available in Warewulf?
Yes. So yeah, so not as a first class going concern. There are ways to have something approximating HA. So much of Warewulf itself is stateless. And so if you can replicate the configuration between two environments, and that's relatively simple to do, then you can have multiple Warewulf servers, and then just whichever one gets the request will feed the node image out to the node that's asking for a configuration, and that's fine. There are other ways to kind of shard it out and have different servers responsible for different parts of the cluster, which isn't really HA. That's more of a load balancing thing. But we at least need to, and this comes back to the issue of documentation, we at least need to clean up our story around that and show people what we mean when we say, hey, here's the strategy for running multiple Warewulf servers, and letting them not quite fail over to each other, but both be active at the same time in the same network. And that way, if one of them goes down, the other one will just continue to work. But something to keep in mind with Warewulf is it's not really a dependent part of the cluster being up and running. It's really only needed when nodes are starting up. So if your cluster is up and working and the Warewulf server goes down, the cluster stays up. You only have a problem if another node shuts down and you need to bring it up, then that node can't come up because its configuration is behind Warewulf, which is down at that time, in this scenario. So in general, it's not as big of a problem as it might seem at first, but we definitely need to get it documented a bit better than it is.
I have a question. Actually, it's just something that's been on my mind. You know how, like, with Rocky, we can see how many people have pulled from the RESF, like how many people are pulling and running and deploying, and we can't really tell any more than that, other than they grabbed it to use it. Is there something like that with Warewulf? Like, do we have an idea of how many people are using it? Or at least
so I don't know right now. I will say that if such a thing exists, I would expect that to come from GitHub Analytics, but I haven't looked into it at all. That's a great question. We should do that. Most of the indication we have for that is participation in the Slack, and when people show up and have questions there, and we see the traffic of people talking about it and asking questions about it, but nothing at the level of downloading it and using it. I expect the OpenHPC community would have some of that information as well, but only for people that are getting it out of OpenHPC instead of getting it from the community directly, from Warewulf directly.
Yeah, great. Okay, just as we got one more question. MB, okay, is there an option to set DIR permissions as part of the disk partitioning?
So I don't think that the facility that we're partitioning the disks with has that capability on its own. But what we would do is just have an overlay for the partition for the mount point. So you'd have one step that provisions the disk and sets the mount, and then another step that configures the permissions on it later. So that should totally be acceptable. And I might even be wrong. It might be that there's a facility to do that during disk provisioning, but I don't think so. I didn't see it when I was setting it up myself earlier.
So how's it going on your end getting the command line back up to share?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to just go back to sharing the screen. It's not letting me do a window. So yeah, if we've done those questions, I've got a few more demo things to do, but I'll start by minimizing this and going blind again. And then, I have to share first. Present share screen. And you just tell me when we're back up because I can't see it now.
I can see it. Yeah, it looks
Okay,
great.
So another thing, well, first of all, we talk about these overlays and explain kind of everything that's in there. But for people that aren't in it every day and haven't used it a lot, it can still feel a little bit opaque. And so one of the things that I hadn't even used until preparing for this, but that a member of the community, I think Christian from SUSE put this out, is improved tab completion for the overlay stuff. So if we say like wwctl overlay list, we can see like overlays here. And then if we look at -a, we can see all of these files. But again, this is still pretty, it's all going to be read only, but there's not a lot you can do with it. But if I say overlay show, and we've had this command for a while to be able to show a specific overlay file, I can now tab complete here and see the overlays that are available. So I can look at this www overlay and then tab complete again to see files that are in it. And so one that I did earlier in prep was to look at the etc sysconfig network interface or network scripts ifconfig. And this is so much easier than even what I was doing before, knowing where all the overlay files are. I can just look directly at this file that's in this overlay, and this is the template that's there. Now this is a little bit complex, and you can try to imagine your node's configuration and how it will apply to this template. But something else, and we've had this feature for a little bit, but actually I don't remember if this is, yeah, I think we had this in 4.4. But we've added this render capability, and so you can say render www node 1 is the node that I have in this environment, and we can see what this file looks like if rendered on that node. And that, coupled with the ability to tab complete through an overlay, makes managing and seeing what your overlays are going to do much more straightforward. So I'm excited to get that into people's hands, and we need to document this capability more than it is right now, because I think this is going to help a lot of people out that are developing custom overlays or modifying these built-in overlays. Get my notes back up here. So another thing that some of our power users have been asking for a while. So if we could look at our node configuration again, this is my node, www node 1. It has multiple profiles, and multiple profiles is something that we have supported for a while. And in general, it's just the last profile that you specify is where configuration comes from. So if profile 2 is what set primary network, if default profile 1 and profile 2 all tell it what its primary network should be, profile 2 is the one that wins. Its value is used. But that was true for overlays as well. So if all three of these set overlays, only the overlays that were set in profile 2 would get used, which is not really what people expected. They wanted to be able to have some overlays in the default profile and then add overlays from this profile and add them from this profile. So that's a big change in Warewulf 4.5.0. And you asked earlier about people that are moving from one environment to another. Most people aren't doing multiple profiles, but if you are, this is a relatively large behavior change. So if we look at node list, we can now see that I have runtime overlay is getting generic overlay 1 and overlay 2. And these are obviously contrived examples. I have overlay 1 coming from profile 1 and overlay 2 coming from profile 2, and the generic is coming from default. But I'm able to just mix these three profiles together and get all of the overlays from them without having to specify the full list, either on the node or on a specific profile. So that will make it much easier to define groupings of behavior for different types of nodes and then mix them together at the end, rather than having to just always have the full set of what a node should be able to do in a single profile. And then one last thing to show off in here. This is something that we didn't even consider was a problem before, but DNS configuration used to happen as kind of an accident for how we were how we were importing containers into Warewulf. When we did that, we were copying the DNS configuration from the host, the Warewulf server, into the container, just so that you had it when you were configuring that container. But we have a new way of doing that, which meant that the provisioned node no longer had DNS configuration. So we've added the ability through the tags functionality. So Warewulf nodes can have tags either per network interface, or I don't have any set here, but you can set them on the node. You can also set them on an IPMI interface, but I don't even have one of those here. But if we set DNS1 and DNS2, and it works for any number of DNS entries actually, you can specify DNS configuration here, and then that, if I go over to my node, gets populated at etcresolve.conf, and then also we can see I configured this on the default network device. It configures it in the interface configuration file for that interface. So this is the new, now official way to configure DNS for your infrastructure. You can do it other ways as well, but this is a pretty handy little addition to Warewulf for doing that. I think the last thing that I'd like to try to do, if I can, is demonstrate. Let's see if I can share this window and get a provision going to just show one of them running. Let's see if it lets me share this window. Hey, it worked. Great.
It did work. Yay.
So this is a node that's already working, but I'm going to reset it here. Yeah, making sure I'm resetting the right node. So one thing I didn't talk about, I talked about DNS mask, and I talked about its ignition is the system that is doing the disk configuration. But I also mentioned iPXE, and iPXE is the system that that actually boots your node and starts Linux traditionally in Warewulf. But we've run into some limitations with iPXE. And so as a preview here, we've introduced the ability to boot a node with grub. And grub is the default bootloader for most Linux environments. If you're just installing Linux on your system directly, you're likely using grub to start it. It's the grand unified bootloader, if I recall correctly. And one of the things we lose is iPXE provides better status indication. It gave us a percentage of how far along the node was in booting. But one of the things we gain with grub is the ability to secure boot your node. So when you build a container, we're actually pulling the grub binary and shim out of that container to use to boot the node. So the end result is if you need secure boot in a Warewulf environment, you can have the entire system secured exactly as it would if you were just installing Linux on your node, and know that everything that's running is signed and verified by your distribution. And we're hoping that grub will also help us with some limitations that we've encountered in Warewulf for node image sizes, where once Warewulf containers, once the node images get to a certain size, we've been having trouble with iPXE being able to provision them. So far, that seems to be going well, but use of grub here is definitely still in a preview state. So it takes a little while, and like I mentioned, I don't have as much progress indication as I would like here, but it should go on to the next step where it's actually booting Linux in not too long. But yeah, here we go. We have our little penguins up here, and it's passed off to Linux now, and it's booting as normal. The reason I wanted to save this to the very end is that I was having some trouble with or it appeared like I was having some trouble remounting the storage from a previous provision. So we see that here. Well, it disappeared there, but it's still trying to mount. Oh, now I understand. Yeah, this is the problem with live demos. This is not actually a problem with the storage. This is it having been told now to mount home and shared off of NFS coming from the head node, which it's not configured to provide. So that's my fault. This is actually working as intended, except for I made a mistake here. So this will eventually give up and the node will be provisioned correctly. But that's where we are today. That's what I've prepared to show off. But if we have any more questions, happy to take those. But yeah.
Yes, I love questions. Okay, so we'll give you guys 1 minute here to ask any other questions that you have of Jonathan at this moment. I had a little bit of a question just because I know that this comes up, and can you just like give a little tidbit of like what an overlay is and like how it's kind of special to Warewulf?
Yeah. So the node image is it's just a directory or like a folder or whatever. It's a copy of what would otherwise just be on the computer's disk, right? It's what we're going to put out into memory. That's what is everything on the node that we're telling it to boot. But if you just have that, then great. It gave up trying to do what it wasn't able to do, and it is booted successfully. So I will. It's my fault for telling it to do something that it couldn't do. I'll stop that for now. So yeah, if all you have is the image, then when you provision that out to the nodes, they're all exactly the same, except for they're not. They're not all exactly the same because they each need to have a name that's different, and they each need to have like a network address that's different so that you can get to each of them. So that's the real, you must have something that lets you configure each node independently from whatever's in the image. And there are various ways to do that. Like in the cloud, there's a system called Cloud Init that is used to apply configuration to your node based on how it's configured in that cloud system. I'm actually interested in and investigating what it would look like to support Cloud Init as a way to configure Warewulf nodes as well. But another thing is how to provision its disk, and so that's what we're using Ignition for. But overlays let you place configuration files on the node that aren't coming from the image itself, that aren't coming from that container. And sometimes that's just for a separation of concerns, because maybe this group of nodes will have this configuration and this group of nodes will have another one. The node images are pretty big and they're harder to manage. So maybe I don't want to have a whole separate image for those two different groups of nodes. I can just say use the same image, use the same Rocky Linux image, and then also these files on these nodes and also these files on these nodes. That's what an overlay is for. But then we also support templates in the overlays that let you say, have it be this file, but then a variable here, put the node's name or put the node's address or that kind of thing. And that's where the templated overlays come in, and those are built for each node individually. So that lets each node have its own configuration, unique in the cluster, so that when it comes up, it's configured properly, it knows its name, it knows what address it should respond on, and that permeates through the configuration. If you have an application, it probably needs to, or there are many instances where that application will need to know what its address is or what the name of the node it's running on is. And sometimes what other nodes exist in the cluster. So the overlay system doesn't just know about itself, but it knows about all of the nodes in the cluster. So you can do complex things like build a config file that tells the node how to reach other nodes in the cluster based on their configuration as well.
Wow. So it sounds like it gives it a lot of like depth and flexibility.
Yeah, it's where all of the configuration flexibility in Warewulf comes in. And so one of the things that we're offering at CIQ, in addition to just like you are running Warewulf, we will support you running Warewulf, we're also building node images for people. If they need configuration or customization in a node image that they're unable to figure out on their own, we can do that. We can provide it to you as source and as a place to pull that image from, and then ingest it directly into Warewulf from a registry. But we're also providing custom overlays, and in my mind, those pair really well. So if you need a custom node image, you probably need some custom overlays to configure the software that's in that node image. So you can pull that image into Warewulf, install this custom overlay, and then use some tags or metadata on your node to configure how you want that application in that image to behave.
Awesome. Well, sold.
Excellent.
So, excellent. There it is.
I'll have Rose contact you about support contract, and
She will. So yes, everybody out there. So obviously, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to the Warewulf team, all the work that you guys have done. I mean, that was really incredible. I think we spent like 20 minutes just talking about the transition and the work that has gone on behind the scenes that is supporting the community at large, not even just about the new features in 4.5.0. So
yeah, it's an exciting time to be a part of the project, and I hope if you're interested that you'll join us on Slack, and especially if you're looking for somewhere to contribute, we'll get you slotted in. We'll find something for you to do for sure.
Yes. We definitely have something for you to do. And if you're looking for the extra features that Jonathan was talking about and the support where you actually have somebody to call and it's not just inside of the Slack community, although they are amazing, CIQ is more than happy to chat with you. So yeah, reach out to us, ciq.com. You can fill out anything that you fill out there, it'll come to us and we'll get you squared away. So
absolutely.
Jonathan, thank you so much. So make sure that you guys subscribe, win that Carhartt backpack on the 1,000th subscriber. We're almost there, you guys. All right, well, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Again, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place.
See you later, Rose.